Welcome to Take It from the Iron Woman. My name is Susanne Müller, your host and the Iron Woman. This podcast is about empowering yourself and others to make real changes in the world. You will hear from everyday, smart, sophisticated, hip people like you and me. Not everybody has to be an Iron Woman to impress the world. Together, we will learn from the sports and business leaders how you can become a more successful person as an entrepreneur or a leader. It's one step at a time, one day at a time. Take your steps now. Take your big steps now. Join me on this journey to success. Take it from the Iron Woman. We only have special guests, and today I'm very honored to have Hilary Barry with us. She's the founder, Secretary General of Lady-Agri. We want to know what a Lady-Agri is, what they do, but also how she manages everything.
Hi, Susanna. Lovely to be with you. And thanks so much for inviting me to join you. Hilary Barry. I'm Irish. I think most people will get that by my accent, even if they can't see the freckles over the pot. Lady-Agri is the non-profit association that I started with my co-founders 4 years ago, Suzanne. And it followed on from, over 27 years of working in Africa. And so it's all in the name, really. It's about linking women in agriculture to access to finance, to access to the technical assistance they need to actually grow their cooperatives, their agri-businesses, their SMEs. We often call these women the invisible drivers of our food systems, or the hidden middle. And I suppose we decided with my co-founders to get together, given our career, given the opportunities we've had in our own lives, to actually sit up and take action. That's what we did 4 years ago. It's all about having boots on the ground. It's very much an organization which is driven by reality. Sometimes we find ourselves a little bit that little kid in the crowd who shouts out, "The emperor has no clothes." That's often the position that we have, having worked in agri-value chains in Africa for so long. There was a shift definitely in the donor community and in the development community. A few years back, agriculture became sexy again in terms of urging banks and private sector to invest. And suddenly when we started talking about investment and trade, there was no longer a mention of women in the conversation. So that's what spurred us to really take action. We're 25 members around Lady-Agri. We're not an all-woman group. I'm very glad to announce that. We have some amazing he for she's working within Lady-Agri, very much men-driven by the idea that, yes, by empowering women, we're empowering communities and we're empowering countries. We're mobilizing those resources which are going to benefit everybody. So that's what Lady-Agri is about in a nutshell.
It's amazing because we need to work together. And while we are supporting the invisible, the ladies, we all need to work together. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. I think if we alienate the ladies and the men, then we cannot collaborate.
It's all about breaking silos, isn't it? And I suppose it's about taking those cultural handcuffs off, maybe getting beyond the titles and the labels and saying, as human beings working together, we can do so much more. And everyone has something to bring to the table. Certainly with the women-led SMEs that we're working with, it's really interesting to see how they run their businesses. And especially in the last few years, everyone has been hit by COVID and is quite anxious at the moment about climate change, about the conflict that is going on and affecting so many of us. It's affecting directly women who are in those conflict zones, but it's also having a knock-on impact on each of our homes, isn't it, in terms of energy prices, food prices, food scarcity. And I suppose when COVID hit, we had, like everybody, it was a shock to the system. and we had to do some soul searching. Our association was barely a year old when COVID hit. Not being able to travel and actually meet with our women-led SMEs or our cooperatives or our partners was very much restricting. But what was amazing at that time was what we actually got back as messages from the women we had reached in our first year. And the message we got from them was, keep going. Europe is being hit first. At that stage, Europe was hit, I think, quicker than what had initially been happening in Africa. And we got so many messages, late night messages saying, keep going. We believe in what you're doing. You're giving us a voice. What you're doing is so concrete. It's what we need. Keep going. So when you get that sort of message, Suzanne, I think you realize maybe we have actually found our purpose. Maybe this is the time to band together and actually work together. And suppose that's what we did throughout COVID. We really tried to keep everybody thinking on a global scale, even though all of us were perhaps housebound, but that we were thinking that we were somewhat connected. We were all going through the same issues. However, some countries, and especially women, were definitely on the front line in terms of those who lost their jobs, those who could not connect with markets. Women in rural areas could not get to urban areas. Urban buyers could not get to them. So there was a whole disturbance, obviously, in everybody's lives. With my co-founders at that stage, with my team, we very much said, well, what can we do? And so we raised our voice. We very much rolled out a strong, I would say, public campaign to say, okay, if we're to get through COVID, if we're to get out, if we're to bounce back, maybe now is the time for a new normal. Maybe now is the time to actually think and actually see those women who are doing fantastic work on the ground, making sure there's food on plates, food on shelves, because imports were disrupted and supply chains were disrupted. And the SMEs we were working with and the cooperatives we were working with at that time, it was really interesting to see how they themselves turned it around and actually started supporting their employee, making sure that they went from actually food buying to food distribution at one stage. They banded together in terms of organizing logistics, making sure that their suppliers were still connected to markets. And that's so important, and especially in what I would say the global south or developing countries where you didn't have those social safety nets. There was no other finance. So seeing that and seeing the interesting kind of social entrepreneurship models that women actually put in place around their SMEs, it gave more and more substance to the whole, I suppose, Lady-Agri approach.
And I think that we can learn from the global south that they are coming together, especially in times of crisis. You said your organization was barely a year. I think sometimes an organization who's younger can pivot and adapt much faster than when you think of United Nations. It's such a huge organization. We're thankful for them. But if you're a smaller organization, you can go, okay, let's turn to the left or listen more rather than all the processes we have, all the checkbox we have. I think this is amazing what you've done. Tell us a success story. How can we as listeners support you, help you?
So I think coming out of, after that COVID story, there were so many success stories that came out of that. And I think one of this was, for example, there was a company we were supporting in Kenya. That company was involved in exporting normally to 5 countries in Europe and in the Middle East. And obviously, because of COVID, everything was shut down for her and she had to let go her 200 employees. So it was a disaster. And you can imagine, over 80% of those were women. The average family, you're looking at 5 children behind all of those. And so we were asked by investors into that company to come in and perhaps support and coach her through the storm. That's what we did. We sat into the passenger seat. We had many a late night call. We had many a Saturday morning thinking and ruminating on what could possibly be done. And we worked with her to kind of restructure her plans at that stage. So perhaps plans that company had on the back burner. Suddenly we said, well, let's be a little bit agile. Let's take those plans out of the cupboard or out of the back burner and have a look and see what we can do. And we stuck with her while she kind of said, okay, this is something that I wasn't thinking about. Let's put it back on track. And by doing that, she actually started looking at the local market and the regional market. So where exports were down, suddenly she was looking at, okay, well, what can I do locally? What can I start doing in my own country? By doing that, within 6 months, she had her workers back. So 6 months later, during COVID, she had her women back to work. She was sending me little videos showing the women taking their little exercise break during working time. And it was fantastic to see a business like that was so low. And definitely the owners and the CEO in question, she was at rock bottom at one stage. And I was thinking, okay, well, if LadyAgri can give her, I suppose, the mental support, perhaps some business and finance guidance at that stage, and seeing how in 6 months it turned around and seeing her bounce back, that was definitely a success story. And what came out of that was the people who had seen the type of work we had done, which was perhaps not tangible for all, because as such, LadyAgri is like an ecosystem builder. And that sounds a very complicated word, but it means we make the links with the investors and the buyers. And we definitely sit in, as I said, in that passenger seat with the women. We will always take it from their needs approach. And then we got a phone call. Out of that phone call, we got a phone call from the King Baudouin Foundation, which is based here in Belgium. And they also have the King Baudouin Foundation in the USA, in New York. And they said, we've seen the work you're doing. This is really interesting work. This is really, that long-term support that women entrepreneurs need and women in agri-value chains need. Why don't we set up a Friends of LadyAgri fund for you? And so out of our, I suppose, COVID strife came this opportunity of people who had witnessed our work and witnessed the impact of our work. And so suddenly LadyAgri had a philanthropic fund, which was managed by an amazing foundation, which was able to give, tax rebates and that to people who donate, whether it be company or personal people who want to make a contribution and put their philanthropic heart forward. And that started our fund in the middle of COVID. And what that actually did then is give us that agility that you spoke about, Suzanne. And that is so important for an organization like us to be able to fund our own projects where we have gone out, we have spent time with the women, we've really seen the needs, and we can finance that new machine that she needs to get to the next level. We can support that cooperative that instead of having food waste, they can actually process products into flour, which is in such demand at the moment, as you can imagine. And so all of that is empowering women day by day, step by step, as you say. Another success story, I would have to say, for LadyAgri is why we got through and why we are where we are today is definitely the strength of the team. We have an amazing team. I'm so lucky as a leader.
How many do you have in your team?
We have 8 people in our team, and they're amazing people in the sense that we band together. Very much so. We look forward to seeing each other on a Monday morning. I'm not sure all colleagues do that. I always count my lucky stars anyway. When I go in, I'm absolutely delighted to hear their opinions. Brain is always turning in a solution, results-orientated manner. I'm very lucky to have the co-founders I have with Ayele Gabiam, who's from Togo. I have Regini Dupont for our program manager, and I have a group of young, energetic economists and data analysts and communication gurus. And it's great to have that kind of intergenerational energy as well. And of course, we would be nowhere without our LadyAgri experts in the field who are the heart and soul of LadyAgri and have their finger on the pulse.
And where are you? In which countries are you active now?
We're active across sub-Saharan Africa including Morocco and Egypt. We have teams in Cote d'Ivoire. We have an amazing team in Guinea, in Cameroon, a new team starting in Congo, our experts in Senegal. I suppose that's the capital that Lady-Agri founders and members brought to the association. So very much high level in terms of technical quality and boots on the ground, as we mentioned earlier, and real understanding as well of what's needed in the field. And I think that's so important. Both you and I, we have that luxury of being invited to perhaps the conferences and the panels and the discussion groups at a high level, but it's so important that we keep that link to the reality and who and what we're talking about, so that we stay, again, solution orientated in what we do.
So. And what help do you need from us? Again, as I said, how can we as individuals help, or is there a group that can go into those places and learn and help?
I think there's lots of linkages. To link in with Lady-Agri, it's really good to understand that, as I said, we're boots on the ground. So definitely leaning in. We work across what we call our 3 pillars: people with agri-value chain experience, people with experience in impact investing as well, because we work with the women themselves. But what we have done is broken down the silos, because we also work with the banks. So we have a role where we want to link the women with both the banks and financial investors, and also, we'll say, sponsors who want to come in and support the women in their trajectory. And then the 3rd pillar is all about having access to that equipment and technology, and to start producing products in a very modern, time-efficient, quality-oriented way. If you fit into any of those categories, which is quite large, or you have experience and you understand, I think, as well, the geography and the cultures, I think that's important to actually lean in with Lady-Agri. Purpose-driven as well, and being focused on moving the dial. I think it's amazing that in 2022, that you and I can be speaking here tonight, and that there's still women without running water. There's still women without electricity. There is still women without access to basic health. And sometimes I think we're running so fast to keep up with the trends that we forget that we actually haven't filled in the foundation blocks which are needed, which is women's access to, obviously, education, which is the very first key in that door to actually move forward in terms of decision making and access to information and exposure, really, into the rest of the world, and connecting with them.
There's a lot of work ahead of us, right? Education,
Absolutely.
Supporting each other. Lady-Agri has a bright future to help a lot of people and also inspire others. And I have one more question for you. How do you motivate and inspire yourself? What do you do when you don't work?
What I do when I don't work? God. Well, I'm very much, as I said, I'm inspired by the relationships that I have with people. And obviously my family is extremely important to me. I've always learned that putting the other person first, being empathetic, is very important. And I've definitely learned that from my own family. And because I'm an expatriate, like I'm living here in Brussels, when I speak about connections, it's so important to build on those. In terms of, I suppose, a personal level, I'm passionate about theatre. Definitely drama and theatre was always my passion. And then what gets me up on a Monday morning, it's thinking that, okay, there are other women who are getting up, and it's a little bit like, okay, let's give it our best. Sometimes it sounds a little bit wishy-washy, but actually getting up and feeling you have a purpose, feeling that your mission is actually a lot bigger than you. And it's not about your ego, and it's not about you as a person, but it's about, okay, what can I contribute? Where this is not a rehearsal, as they say, in terms of life. It's about making those days count and giving back. I suppose I'm one of that 10% of very lucky women, the first in my family actually to have perhaps got to university stage. If I look from my grandparents and my father, my uncle or aunt, when you've been given that opportunity, when you've had so much exposure to have traveled, to have lived in different countries with different cultures, to have met so many amazing people. I suppose the career I've had to date, I think at my age, it's definitely time to give back and make those days count. When your days count, it's easy to be motivated.
Wow. Thank you so much for just a little glimpse. I think this is just a start of a conversation.
Thanks so much, Susanna. Thank you. Thank you.
What a great conversation to have. It's about paying forward. It's about giving others the opportunity. This is our obligation. Thank you so much, Hilary. We'll hear more from Lady-Agri. Take it from the Iron Woman. We have episodes every Monday with very cool people that have a great story, and the story needs to be heard. Take It From the Iron Woman is also a book. Download it or buy it in your local store. It's about business coaching and sports parallels. Thank you for your support. See you soon. Bye-bye.